If you're pro-life, great. Don't have an abortion. That's what I think about when it comes to happiness, not to get too deep into women's rights. It's just me, myself, and I'm going to be happy over here, and I'm going to encourage and support happiness in
Right.
everybody else. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Fuck Your Podcast. I'm Emma Pardo.
And I'm Katy Martin. And today we were talking about, what was the topic that you said?
Holding yourself accountable for your happiness and life satisfaction.
Oh, yeah. I love throwing out happiness as a choice to anybody that gets pissed off. They don't really like that.
It holds a lot of gravity because it does ring pretty well true.
Yeah.
And that's something that's so less wise, age 26, is just that I have found that if I don't set expectations, I can't get disappointed. So then life would just be a happier place. Because I feel like with me, I set expectations, I get disappointed, and then that disappointment just builds up, and then it just eventually.
You set uncommunicated expectations.
Correct.
Right.
And that's what's frustrating is that I think about it more often now, going, okay, if I don't set this expectation, I'm not going to be disappointed and I'll be fine.
Everything that you just described is the source of almost every single issue that anybody ever has in their marriage, like 100%.
And that's where it stemmed from, is just Cole wasn't doing anything bad, but I feel like I was setting that uncommunicated expectation, and then I would be disappointed, and then I'd be, it turned into frustration, and then it just ruined the day. And I was so sick and tired of feeling angry every day. Well, it wasn't every day. That sounds really dramatic, but you get what I'm saying. It was like a consistent, like maybe it was a week or something where I was just like frustrated. And I was like, I'm so tired of feeling this. I just want to feel happy. And it's not that I was unhappy. I was doing it to myself.
Right. Frustration's a choice. You're getting frustrated about something that you can't control, or getting upset by, like, there's validity. Like, your feelings are valid, but putting that onus on someone else to say that, hey, this is your responsibility to make me happy based on the way that you behave, because you can choose how you respond to somebody's behavior. And what's funny is, like, society is like, you marry someone because they make you happy. No, the things you do together, the life you build together makes you happy if that's what you want. Right. But it's all based on choice. Like, everything that comes down to anybody that says, I'm just not happy, they're unhappy with the situation that they've also contributed to create. And that's the hardest pill to swallow, because it's so easy to blame someone else. And it does take a lot of emotional maturity and years of relationship building and maintenance. And it's not even just like a spouse or a significant other. It's your parents, it's your siblings, it's friends, it's colleagues. And if being in a situation makes you unhappy, like, it's not that other person's responsibility, but if they are doing things that are toxic or detrimental or dangerous, then for my own inner peace and my own happiness, then you may not be able to be a part of that.
Right.
But there's also a difference that's just like, I'm unhappy in my current situation. So, like, let's use a marriage, for example. This is usually the simple way that people put it is they'll say, hey, I'm unhappy right now. It must be the marriage. So I want a divorce because I'm just not happy. But is that really because of the other person? Or is it cumulative things? In most cases, it's cumulative things of uncommunicated expectations that have led to disappointment, and somebody doing something that you don't like, effectively communicating that with them, so as opposed to attacking them. Because if you let everything lead to a fight, then that's just as much your fault as the other person's. And it's hard because you tend to get the most emotional with the person that you're the most emotionally connected with.
Right.
So if you have big blow-ups and fights and whatnot, that's usually due to the lack of your own emotional immaturity, because that's the person that you actually love the most.
Right.
So it takes practice. Like, that's that whole thing of, like, I don't talk about this shit lightly. Like, it's easy. Like, being in a relationship with somebody for 25 years is not always easy.
Right.
But throwing in the towel at 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, like, especially once you get to that 7 to 10 year mark, and if there's just one day where you're like, no, I'm over it, and the marriage must be the problem, it's usually not the problem. It's usually there's multiple symptoms that nobody's paying attention to.
Right. And here's the thing, at the end of the day, I feel like, and this is not to say it would be very general of me to say, well, typically people that throw in the towel want this. But however, when you become so unhappy and it's like one of those situations where it's just that buildup of disappointment because of the uncommunicated expectation,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like I look at my previous relationships and I see, the past two relationships or the only two other relationships that were before Cole. It was like I was setting those expectations, getting disappointed, but I wasn't communicating the disappointment. I let it build up and then I was like, okay, I'm done. But by the
Right.
time I had reached that point, I was like, it makes it easier to end it. But now going through that and being able to, one, discover the red flags that triggered that disappointment, but two, be able to go, before I get disappointed, is this me or is this an actual problem? I think is a way that I've matured as I've lived life, which changes a lot. It's hard to do outside of my relationship, I will say, because I still struggle with it with like family and friends. And that just makes me sound like I'm always disappointed. That's not true. But when those situations happen,
Mm-hmm.
it's harder for me to ask myself that first because I don't have that emotional connection to them like that, like I do with Cole.
Yeah, that's the simple to say. Happiness is a choice. Happiness is something it's 100% internal. And what you tend to find out more is that the things that you're unhappy with about yourself is what you try to find in someone else, especially your significant other, to then make them the reason that you're unhappy because you're unwilling to face the fact of your own frustration. Happiness is more likely with yourself.
Right.
It's with your situation. So, somebody who might say things like, I'm unhappy because of we don't have time to go and do things anymore and we're working all the time. A lot of those things they have control over, right? And
Right.
you communicate. So if you're working all the time, can you control your work schedule? Can you prioritize? Everyone has the same 24 hours in the day. So can you prioritize the things that are going to make you happy? Because usually just throwing in the towel is, well, in a relationship, which I know we're talking more about happiness, but just to say, hey, this thing over here, this whole situation that I'm not addressing is easier to just quit and walk away from. But in reality, it's going to be harder. It's going to be way harder.
Right.
Because if you're unhappy with a scenario that you're heavily involved in, then you still didn't solve the problems that are with you. So that's just going to carry on to the next relationship, or it's going to carry on to where you're really not getting to the root cause of why you're unhappy, or willing to look at the fact that your unhappiness is internal, or in general, your happiness is internal. So you have more control over that based on controlling your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions,
Mm-hmm.
which anybody can do. But I'm not going to ever say that it's easy. So there's a difference. So what do you think the difference is between the whole choice aspect of it and the internal work versus legitimately being involved with people or scenarios that really just don't serve you anymore? How do you think that ties into happiness?
So here's the thing, you could still go in without that if you don't set that uncommunicated expectation. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't sit down and say, hey, this is what I expect. There comes a time when you'll notice that it doesn't serve you anymore. You'll get to that point. It's just easier. I think it's internally, it's easier to admit that it doesn't serve you anymore. So for example, like my last two relationships was that uncommunicated expectation, getting to the point of, but it's
Right.
easier to point out everything that they did that was a disappointment instead of just going, I really am not in this anymore. And that's why I didn't communicate that I was disappointed. You just let
You-
it build up and build up and build up. And then one day you're just like, oh my God, I can't stand your face anymore.
Yeah, I can get that, but do you think do you think that there's an instance where people use that as an excuse where they're not communicating the fact, or they're able to justify it in their head when in reality they're look at how this could all be tied together. They're unhappy with the scenario situation that they've also had a part in creating. They can easily put that on the other person and not self-reflect by just going, well, this relationship just doesn't serve me anymore. How do you differentiate between that being real versus a cop-out?
That's a tough question.
Isn't it? I know.
I
mean,
was
'cause
going to say the
I
thing
think
that
people do that.
I think, and this doesn't really answer the question. In my head, it does, I guess. When it no longer serves you, is that feeling of like you're fulfilling somebody else's expectations, but you don't like. So say you have the expectation of me, and that expectation of me is to go to alpha events. right? Say that that's the expectation, that you want me to go to alpha events as your business partner. And then you're like, okay, this is what I want you to do. It's for work.
Right.
Like I'm thinking of it as a work scenario. It's
Okay.
for work. This is what I expect you to do as your role in this company. And I say, okay, and fulfill that expectation and check it off the list on paper and go to the event. But I am miserable because I don't align with the alpha industry.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's real
I look at
specific.
that as that's when you can identify that it no longer serves you, instead of I'm so disappointed Katy asked me to go to this event.
Yeah, and I guess maybe because I'm relating it a little bit more to like marriage and personal relationships. But
Yeah.
I think the distinction though in the professional scenario where you can be really all like you could be happy with the day-to-day of the job. Like maybe you're happy with your customers and you're happy with your clients and you're happy with the day-to-day work, and then something changes where it's in a professional setting. I would say that the belief system of the company has changed, or it's been perverted into
Mhm.
something that it isn't anymore. But what it ends up doing is, if it the way that you could say it doesn't serve me anymore, I clearly where it's genuine, because I think if you say, well, that just doesn't serve me anymore, can sound so cliche sometimes. But
Right.
the way that I looked at it, or at least in my experience, was that I felt the way that it impacted me in a professional setting was, it is now a situation has now been created that I can no longer have a part in controlling, and not that I needed control, but I didn't have a hand in contributing to the direction that it was going, and it was preventing my personal growth.
Right.
So it was preventing my personal growth, and it was going in a direction that was against my moral compass.
Right.
And so that's what so that in a professional setting is easy to say that doesn't serve me anymore. In a personal setting, I think it can easily be as a cop out. Like like you can use that as an excuse to go, I don't want to have the tough conversations to maintain this relationship, so it's just easier for me to cut that person out.
So, and that's the thing that sucks, is that I feel like people have made it so easy to walk away. Divorce rate is super high. Also,
Right.
it's very general to say that. There's some situations that are just completely understandable.
Sure. I mean, yeah, and there's certain
But I
situations
mean,
where it's super one-sided, or like if you have a
right.
narcissistic partner or a narcissistic parent, like there are instances, or if there's abuse involved, like there are
Right.
instances where it's just like, you cut this really no longer serves me. This whole situation's makes me unhappy, and I cannot control my own happiness without ending this and cutting things out. But then I see it's the middle, right? It's the broad spectrum in the middle, not the extremes of neglect and abuse and whatnot, but just it's just the middle ground of, I'm complacent, and really I think it sometimes comes down to being lazy. Like, happiness isn't something that's simple. It can be, like,
It can be. I was going to say,
it
I
can be
think we've
very simple.
overthought the concept of happiness. I think we've
Maybe.
overthought as a society,
I think as a society we've overthought how people should accommodate to someone else's happiness.
This
And
is very true.
I hate saying that's it is. Like, I can't control your experience. I can't control how you react. As long as I know that I'm a kind person, I can sleep at night, right?
Right.
So if you don't, and if we can come to an agreement, and as far as we have things in common and we enjoy each other's company, and I don't do anything mean or like
At the end
detrimental
of the
to
day,
you,
it comes down to
it's
mind your business.
yeah. Some
At
some
the
of it
end of the
is.
day, like that, and that, I don't know why that made me think of, and this is getting a little bit political, but like as far as women's rights,
Mhm.
I'm pro-choice in the sense of I probably wouldn't get an abortion myself.
Sure.
However,
Not my
I'm not gonna
choice for the
speak.
other people.
I'm not speaking on everybody else's behalf. Me and myself, this is what I would do. But if somebody else if say 90% of the female population is pro-life, but there's still that 10% that's pro-choice, I'll be pro-choice, because who am I to control their life? If you're pro-life, great. Don't have an abortion. That's what I think about when it comes to happiness, not to get too deep into women's rights. It's just me, myself, and I'm going to be happy over here, and I'm going to encourage and support happiness in
Right.
everybody else.
Exactly.
But
Like, if you're happy, if you're doing something that makes you happy, I'm going to cheer you on. If you're doing something that makes you happy, is again not illegal, you're not hurting someone else, I'm going to cheer you on. And your own happiness can be something incredible. It can be something incredibly simple. Like, but what people tend to default on is that someone else holds that power over you. And that's
Right.
never really the case. So the more that you put it on someone else's responsibility for your own personal happiness, you're going to be unhappy.
Right.
But that's a thought process that you can change. Like that you can change. Some people don't like to hear it, you know, if they're in the middle of fighting with their boyfriend or their girlfriend and there's a lot of issues going on, they're not going to like to hear, well, your happiness is your choice. Like you contribute to the situation as well because it is a relationship. They don't like to hear that. And sometimes that's the truth that some people just need to face in order to create their own happiness. I think, like, you're right. Stay in your lane, mind your business. worry about yourself, and that's
Worry about
when
yourself.
worry about yourself is when
And
you're
that-
going to be most happy.
Again, that's been so overcomplicated. It's just worry about it's something that in my personal life I need to work on, is going, this is out of my control, or this is something that I don't have to have control over, and taking that step back and going, oh, this is like pretty stress-free over here.
Right?
It's about staying on that side of it, because sometimes I get a little crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's okay too. Want to hear a topic? Want to ask a question? Want to just stop by and say hi? You can reach us on Instagram at F__K your pod, or you can email me at Emma@99creatives, or Katy
at 99 Creatives.
If you want to see more business related content, you can follow us on Instagram or TikTok at 99 Creatives. And don't forget to subscribe, because we have new videos every Friday, or new episodes every Friday. Okay, bye.
Adios.